Hola, muy buenas. Aquí estamos de nuevo. Cambio al inglés. Hello, here we are. We are here to present the key opening conference of the Congress, which is a pleasure to have with us Douglas Hegley. Douglas is here to speak about the digital strategy of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. He is the director of the digital area, where he has worked with the innovation and connection with the audiences. He has a very strong reference to other museums, like the small and medium museums we have in REMED and in this conference, to inspire what can be done and what other resources could be focused on it. He has a background of psychology, where to work very good with the connection with the audiences, with the human part of the people that is at the museum, and breaking some walls between people and technologies. No, he has worked for more than 9 years in the digital area of the Institute of Art of Minneapolis, MIA. And also previously he worked at the Met, working for 14 years, collaborating with several professionals to put together technology and people. Here he is going to speak about that, and it's a pleasure having him today. Douglas, please, when you want. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, gracias. Can you hear me? Is everything good?
Yeah.
Excellent. Buenas tardes, buenos dias, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are located. I hope that you are enjoying the beginning of this conference, and I hope that we can have a little time together. Can I have the slides, please? Excellent. So as Anna mentioned, I am Douglas Hegley. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and it's an honor to be with you today virtually. I've been in my current position for 2 years. That means I was hired during this terrible global pandemic, and I worked remotely for several months, overseeing a distributed workforce of more than 50 staff. As Anna mentioned, for the 9 years before my current job at the Met, I was a Chief Digital Officer at the Minneapolis Institute of Art, which is another encyclopedic art museum in the middle north of the US. I was the first executive level technology leader at that museum and worked hard to enable digital transformation and audience engagement. That museum has nearly 300 staff, and before the pandemic was averaging just under 1 million visitors per year. And again, as Anna mentioned, ironically, prior to Minneapolis, I also worked at the Met for 14 years. I helped the staff adopt and implement technology and to begin to think strategically about how to use digital to reach and engage audiences. My formal educational background is in psychology, not in digital technology. You might ask, what does psychology have to do with digital transformation in museums? Well, the practice of psychology focuses on 3 things: people, truth, and change. You work with people and you help them see the truth, embrace the truth, in order to make positive changes in their lives. Digital technology leadership in entrenched cultural heritage institutions requires this kind of perspective. And I might add, my father was an art teacher, and I spent many vacations visiting museums, and I always had a love affair with cultural heritage and with great art. The truth that our sector has to deal with is that digital transformation is real. It's here. If you try to ignore it, it becomes the elephant in the room. And psychologists are good, very good, at pointing out the elephant in the room. But I also mentioned people. And if there is a central connection that ties together what I've done throughout my career. It's people. I am a tireless advocate for people in all of our wonderful variety and potential. When I say the pace is fast, I'm not just referring to technology. I am aware that I can get excited and talk very fast. And I feel I have a lot of ground to cover today. So let's get started. Vamos. Let's begin with a general perspective on digital technology and on audiences. The rapid growth of computer technology over the past 2 decades has been nothing less than astonishing. I bought my first desktop computer in 1984. Many people now own a wristwatch that is far more computing power. It's in this, the impact of this technological expansion includes the expectation by people for constant internet connectivity, to have information that is available on demand, and a reliance on digital technology for connecting to others. In such a world, non-digital interfaces and experiences may actually become less relevant, which can be a little frightening for us in the museum sector. Modern day audiences, according to research by LaPlaca Cohen, are feeling stressed, but they're more active. They are more open-minded, less bound by tradition. Those are opportunities that we have for engagement. In addition, these audiences are drawn to convenience and fun and joy. They're looking for new perspectives. They want to participate in things that include family and friends, so very social. And even beyond that, experiences that confirm or uplift or highlight their identity or their sense of community. And audiences of the near future are expanding the definition of culture. So it's not just museums. They're seeing culture in a much broader context and a much broader range of experiences. Social media remains a primary way of communicating, again, sense of self, sense of identity. And people are interested in being more active, mobile activities, rather than simply consuming content. We're also seeing that the idea of loyalty is being redefined in the near future. The likelihood of things like subscriptions and memberships seems to be fading. And this spirit of action, we say less view, more do. So less simply sitting back and passively absorbing information and more actively partaking in cultural activities. In that context, we must ask about the core purpose of digital for cultural heritage. Why digital? And I think there's an enormous opportunity because digital can deliver in 3 key areas: reach, engagement, and impact. Reach is the number of people who experience digital content. We measure reach with metrics like total unique visits to a website or overall page views. Our goal is to increase reach over time. But reach is not the most important goal. Reach would be an important goal if we were marketing agencies, but we are cultural heritage organizations. So reach is important, but it's not the most important goal. So let's talk about engagement. Engagement is looking at the effectiveness of your content. And we measure engagement with things like page views per session, session duration, repeat visitors, some kind of participation like a purchase or a social media follow. Those are indications that when our content has reached someone, they are actually paying attention to it, that we're connecting with the audience. The goal is to increase engagement over time. And we typically do that with rich content or opportunities for interaction. But again, engagement is not the complete goal. It's a very important goal, but it's not the complete goal. What we're really after is impact. And impact is looking at how audiences are changed by their experiences, by our digital content. We seek to measure learning and also lasting impressions and reflections over time. And frankly, things like donations too. We're looking to have meaningful, deeper impact upon the way that people think of themselves and think of their world. The goal is to create lasting impact, inspire creativity, increase tolerance and empathy, support multicultural perspective, increase mutual understanding in the world. In other words, museums can change lives for the better. From research, psychology research, we know that we can have a positive impact on people's lives when they have experiences that resonate with them on a deep emotional level. One of those experiences is awe. People who experience awe in their lives are more connected to others. They're more generous, they're more caring. They can actually become better people. If that doesn't excite us about what we can do with digital experiences for the future, I'm not sure what will. Now that I've framed what I think is inspirational about digital, let's talk a little more specifically about the Met, because I think it's interesting to focus on what is the work of digital at the Met? What are my areas of responsibility there? So here's a slide with lots of words. As you can see by this long list, I have plenty of work that I'm responsible for, all under the heading of audience engagement and impact. It's producing digital media, it's creating applications and websites, it's digital design and product development and innovation and digital asset management, and all the way down to media services. So we are importantly interacting with the public through digital channels at every level. But what is also interesting, I think, is what is not my current areas of responsibility. So I am not responsible for the IT area at the Met. That's a colleague of mine, nor does the social media function report to me. That reports into the marketing area. Of course, my staff works in close partnership with staff in those other areas, but they are not currently my responsibility. At the Met, we put a lot of effort into ensuring that our digital efforts are firmly planted in the core mission of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So of a quality to match the stature of the Met, integrated into the museum's vision and strategy, with technology that is flexible and adaptable, because this is all leading to transformative and lasting change. I would say not just digital decoration or not just digital window dressing. Before the pandemic, museums were slowly embracing digital, and I emphasize the word slowly in most cases. Perhaps you've seen this graph, the technology adoption lifecycle. On the left, the innovators and the early adopters, together labeled as tech enthusiasts, making up only 16% of the total. On the right, those who just aren't there yet, whether for pragmatic or skeptical reasons. And that majority of people that's the mainstream market. Museums that fall on the left side had four things in common. They had staff with digital skills, and they hire for digital skills. They devote resources for digital activity, and they typically have seen steady growth in their digital output since about 2005. And finally, they use an audience-first strategy. So they're always thinking about audience engagement as a primary factor in all decisions and initiatives they undertake. Museums that fall on the right-hand side have lagged behind, and they share these 5 characteristics. They tend to have staff who don't have digital skills or aren't developing digital skills. And they don't devote resources or invest money and time into digital. They'd rather wait and see. Let others pave the way. Let's really see if this is important or not. They tend to employ a museum-first strategy rather than an audience-first strategy. So their own perspective, their own knowledge, their own expertise is what's driving decision-making, not what's engaging the audiences. And then finally, when I say impact seemed minimal, what I mean is that these organizations, even when they did digital initiatives, they didn't see a large impact of those initiatives. And I think in many ways, this is particularly true for museums that relied on travel and tourism. So because there was an influx of people into their organizations on a weekly basis, they didn't necessarily feel the need to invest a lot in digital. But then, of course, as we all know, the major disruption in all of our lives of this global pandemic, which arrived to hit us suddenly and severely. And I don't want to, for 1 minute, downplay that this has been a horrible disease that has taken millions of lives and is a terrible tragedy. But also, for our purposes today, to focus a little bit on what kind of impact this had on our sector. First of all, travel and tourism ended abruptly. We were faced with sudden closures, dire predictions about loss of revenue and audience, staff losing their jobs, people being sent home without the proper equipment to do their work. It was a very, very frightening moment. And there was a mad scramble to go digital, even for museums and other organizations that were not well prepared. So if we think of that graph, those on the right who really hadn't set the groundwork for doing digital efforts still felt this panic, this sense that they had to go digital immediately. And, we understand this, the reasons were clear, at least from the perspective of executive leadership. They felt forced. They felt that they had no choice. They worried about the future. And they made assumptions about staff who worked on digital technologies, that they were perfectly equipped to work from home instantly. And as you can imagine, this initial burst of digital activity was actually surprisingly successful at first to many of us. We saw traffic to our websites skyrocket. We saw digital engagement numbers go up initially, but it would not last. It simply could not be sustained. Our audiences were rapidly overwhelmed and became exhausted by just the sheer amount of digital content that was not only available to them, but was essentially being pushed toward them through social media channels, through direct email, those kinds of things. Not to mention our staff was exhausted because they were working on, sort of home computers and staying up late hours and trying to produce content at a rate they'd never produced it before. But the lesson in all of this is that more is not always better. You can create so much noise with digital that you lose the signal, you lose the important piece of what people need to be focusing on. Now, what is most important is the quality of the content that is produced. We have learned that there are specific types of content that have performed particularly well, particularly for us at the Met, during the COVID-19 pandemic. So what we call evergreen content. This is content related to objects in our collection. So we create the content that has lasting value. It's the kind of thing that stays alive like an evergreen tree for a very long time. Content that is stories, particularly stories about people, and especially short form video. So I'm saying approximately 5 minutes, but it could be anywhere from 3 up to even 10 minutes long. But short form video featuring human beings has been performing exceptionally well. Content designed for children and families, most organizations found this to be true. And our object pages, so individual landing pages across the site where people are coming in from search engines and landing on a specific object, it causes us to think a little bit about what we do with those pages, which can tend to be deep into the website. But if that's the place that most website visitors are landing in their first exposure to the Metropolitan Museum online, how do we design those pages to be most effective for that situation? One way, is to put all of this together into a digital strategy. I want to talk about layering as a vital core construct of digital strategy for cultural heritage. And in this regard, I'm going to use an analogy. I'm going to say that digital can enable layering based on hyperlinking, right? The content is linked to other content. And this can provide us with a framework for interpretation. So the analogy that I want to use is that of a beach resort. Imagine a beach resort. Most visitors to a beach resort, they only put their feet in the water, or perhaps they go for a short swim. Others are more engaged, more curious. They might go on a snorkeling excursion, and certainly there's a specialized customer. Will go scuba diving, spend a lot of money, but the resort treats all of these customers with respect, welcomes them, and does everything they can to make their stay as enjoyable as it can be. We must take this same approach with our audiences, because the majority of our audiences do not come to us with deep prior knowledge, nor a desire to develop expertise. That is not the goal that they're coming to visit museums for, in general. So in order for us to engage as many of them as we can, it is our responsibility to deliver content that meets multiple and varied needs. This is not and never will be dumbing things down. We call it interpretation, right? In our sector, it's called interpretation. The goal is to invite and welcome, orient and delight our audiences at whatever level they are interested in experiencing. So this is opening as many doors as possible and meeting audiences where they are, with respect, with enthusiasm, for all of them, whatever their prior knowledge may be. So let's put that interpretive strategy and digital strategy into context. We live in a world that has been transformed by ever more ubiquitous digital technology. This causes our audiences, our customers, to have a set of expectations for content access, convenient transactions, and personalized service. Of course, our organizations produce our content digitally now, and we share our content via digital platforms like never before. The expectations remain true even in the very special physical spaces that our museums provide. In the presence of real things that are imbued with history, rarity, creativity, things that are both valuable and meaningful to the digital strategy. So the digital strategy must take all of these things into consideration. Advantages of having a clear digital strategy are actually many, right? It emphasizes the transformative power of digital, helps to align multiple digital efforts, provides clarity, transparency, enables the long-term success for digital efforts. It also recognizes digital as a specialty, right? Digital is still a very young discipline, particularly in our sector. A digital strategy can be a teaching tool across the organization. It can frame decisions and it can help manage expectations. But I will say that please understand there are situations in which a digital strategy can backfire. We have to be careful that our digital strategy does not confirm that digital is some kind of extra thing that's not core to the mission of the institution, that it's separate, the job of someone else, right? How do we make sure that our digital strategy is incorporated into the overall organization? Your digital strategy has to be careful to include people. Focusing on technology and leaving out people is a big mistake. We don't want to make it unnecessarily complex. We don't want to make it sound self-justifying, defensive, or make it seem like it's all just very, very expensive. One of the factors to take into account when you are thinking about your digital strategy is, where are you in terms of digital readiness? Are we ready? So one way to look at readiness is to use a digital strategy maturity model. This provides any organization with an honest look in the mirror that can guide understanding and help inform us as to our organization's level of readiness. Now, I'm basing this on a Forrester research, but it's developed this model for categorizing digital maturity, breaking it into quadrants. We can take a look along two dimensions: customer experiences, that's the vertical dimension on the left, and operational excellence, which is the horizontal axis on the bottom. Taking this one step further, Forrester adds labels to illustrate each quadrant. Some organizations have been quick to address user focus, but lag behind in best practices and sustainability of technology. Those are the user-focused organizations. Other organizations are labeled as digital dinosaur, which is a little derogatory, because some organizations have simply been held back by very real constraints or by leadership that's been unable to decide to move ahead. Remember the adoption curve from earlier. If that's your organization there in the lower left, you've got plenty of catching up to do, and your digital strategy will focus on basic building blocks. Oops. If you're an organization with strong technology, but lack a user focus, then your approach will be to move in that direction. Now, some organizations have been quick to address user focus. So if you're finally if you're in that green area, if you're in the leading edge, then be in contact with me, because I want to learn from you. I think those organizations are few in our sector. And your digital strategy, your approach to your digital work will be different depending on your readiness, right? If you're behind the curve, you just need to get started. If you've already focused on users, you need to think about improving your technology. If your technology is great, think about audiences. And if you're on the leading edge, the few of you who might be out there, work on making that sustainable, because that is your path forward. Now, if you charge ahead with a digital, work without the strategic approach, these are some of the risks, right? If you charge ahead with digital without really thinking about readiness or strategy, you're going to have a hard time setting priorities. Your organization may lack the knowledge to take it forward and lack financial investment. And these organizations, I've seen it time and time again, rely too much on underempowered and underpaid staff, usually junior staff or even unpaid interns, to do the digital work for them. That is not a sustainable model. However, there are risks of not moving forward, right? Your organization can be seen as irrelevant or even obsolete, and you are likely to lose audience in this day and age. And you don't have that strong foundation for growth. So very important to move forward, combining your mission, your vision with a digital strategy. Now, I want to close out by talking a little bit about things that I'm imagining for the future, and turning our eyes to arenas that I'm excited about or interested in. I believe that augmented reality technologies hold great promise for our sector. Again, this is the layering interpretive content, this time on top of a real world experience. This example is available to you right now. If you go to chroma.com .netmuseum.org, we are maybe wait until after there's a break in the action today, but we are using WebXR, web technologies, to begin to implement and experiment with augmented reality that you can use in the galleries or even at home. And people are engaging with it. They're interested in it. And this is a natural extension of projections that we have used in the Met to help folks understand that, for example, this ancient temple was once covered with color. And once AR is more common, we won't need to rely on these limited, expensive projections that we can are only really effective in the evening, because the experience will take place through a visitor's own lenses and devices. So here's a sort of commercial example, right? That you would have simple consumer-grade glasses, digital hardware that is AR enabled, but this is going to improve rapidly and costs are going to come down. When I think of it in the museum sector, what about an AR virtual docent? Imagine being able to access your favorite docent anytime and in many different languages. Web3 has become a catch-all for the natural evolution from a technology perspective of the internet. Initially, and this was my career back in Web 1.0, where we're just trying to get something online. And it really was read-only. It was sort of like, digital billboards, we would say. In Web 2.0, we saw participation, right? Social media. But Web 2.0, with its centralized data structure, we, the people, became the commodity. So the social media platforms are actually selling data, using our data to increase their revenues. Web3 should democratize that, right? You should be able to own your content and your data instead of a central repository. That's the central theory there. But every time I talk about Web3, I think you can predict what question I immediately get asked by trustees and everyone else. What about NFTs? Everybody wants to know about NFTs. I will tell you from the Met's perspective, we are not collecting NFT artwork. We are not minting NFTs from the Met's collection. We don't see this as in alignment with our mission. We don't see the net revenue here as being important for us. So we're not moving in that way. However, collectibles, NFTs, as if they were ticket stubs, and sometimes this uses something called POAP or proof of attendance protocol. That's kind of interesting. Can we think, instead of pulling objects from our collection and looking just for pure profit, can we think about creating blockchain tokens for people to say, hey, I was there? And how do you attach utility to those NFTs so that there's a community that starts to be built through those technologies, communicating with each other and with the museum as well? We think there's a future in fundraising using tokens, whether those are NFTs or the NTTs, non-transferable tokens, a way for people to be able to participate by purchasing a digital asset that they then can keep and be part of a community. But still, for me, NFTs often feel like this. I get contacted dozens of times every month by some new company who sort of feels this like, hey man, you want to buy a watch? Like this kind of like seedy side of NFTs that it's all about money. And frankly, it's about the people wanting to use the Met for their revenue. It's kind of not, it doesn't feel right for the Met, because we have to think about the volatility of this market. We have to think about the mission of our museum and our reputation as well. I know the net revenue is not anywhere near what the gross revenue that's been announced in the press and all the press releases. People aren't making as much money as they claim on these things. And we worry about the ecological impact, although I think they're finding ways with technology to reduce some of that now. I'm also very interested in natural language processing. This is potential for real-time language translation driven by machine learning. The technology exists now, but I have not seen it applied effectively in the museum sector. I feel it's something we should be experimenting with because, in part, we'll never have enough resources to translate all of our content into all of the languages that people would like to interact with that. So we can't work manually for years and years and years. I think if we can look at artificial intelligence and natural language processing, there's a good future there. And of course, I can't leave out the metaverse. Here we have Second Life, which is one of the first forays there. Roblox, World of Warcraft, Fortnite. These are all versions of metaverse experiences which start to overlay on museums in a kind of interesting way, right? Persistent virtual world, you interact there as an avatar, but those interactions can be real time and you're not bound by physical laws. Now, for my youngest son is 14 years old, he finds this very exciting. I find that trustees tend to dismiss this as, oh, that's just gaming. But it's not, and it is inevitable. A metaverse experience will be part and parcel of all of our experiences in the very near future. But that being said, most importantly, I will emphasize museums have the potential to be cathedrals of awe, providing those jaw-dropping moments where people say, wow, that's amazing. My responsibility, ultimately, is to deliver that experience through digital means. Thank you. Gracias. I think we have a little bit of time. I'm happy to take a couple of questions if there are any out there.
Thank you, Douglas. It's been a real pleasure to hear you. I was sure you were a very good key opening of the conference, but I was not that sure. I was impressed because really our idea was to speak about the digital strategy of the Met to inspire all the museums, and you have explained it perfectly. And really, it's important to know that and to get notice of all that. I was saying how impressed I was by your conference. I really love that. We wanted you to speak about digital strategies as the key opening conference for this Congress, but I was really impressed how you really explained that very good with the different layers of the scenarios and the difficulties that actually museums have, because it's not the pandemic, it's after the pandemic and what we can do now, what the problems are. So about this, and I encourage people to make questions at the chat during these 10 minutes, if we can. But I will start with one question in the meantime that the people start with questions in the chat. For that small and medium museums that we have in Remed, that is 80% of our associates, of course, they can have an example with the Met and inspire their strategies and so on. But can you explain if it's like that in your opinion, and how big museums can inspire small museums or don't, or what can be done in that way? Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting question, and one that I get asked frequently, right? The budget number that we have at the Met is huge, and I have almost 60 staff to work with. So I think you're on the right track to say, what can be inspirational? I wouldn't try to emulate what a large, well-funded digital operation is doing, but are there little pieces that you can pull and think about effectively? So the slide I showed saying, here's the content that's working for us, right? One piece of content that's working for us is content for children and families. That's really engaged people, and that's accelerated during the pandemic and hasn't really fallen off like other content. So I think if you think about focus, can you focus on content for families and families with children? That's what people are seeking. So providing that above other kinds of content can be very important. Secondly, when I'm working with smaller organizations, I often say, I know there's a broad world of social media platforms and websites and video, and it's too much when you're small and you have to be focused. Pick one and do it well. So right now, I think what we're seeing is Instagram currently is really the engagement platform when you don't have a lot of resources or a lot of time. You can create wonderful, funny Instagram posts quickly. You don't need to do them every day. You don't need to do them every hour of every day, even just a couple of times a week, just to share something. And what we find on Instagram is that sort of behind the scenes views or insider information, a very short interview of someone who works, behind the scenes in a museum, with one little tidbit about something funny that happened, those take off and those create engagement without a lot of effort or a lot of money on the part of people who create that content.
Thank you. That's very, very interesting. And we will keep on that content. We have one question from David Noguerales. He's asking, so when you mention digital strategy, I must think on the content delivered out of the museum, delivered over the internet or social media websites. So you presented a couple of examples on how to deliver digital content on site, like projections. So he wonders if you can give us some color on how the reaction of the visitor was to this experience.
Generally speaking, visitors, when you're able to do something that they can't do on their phone, that's what impresses visitors the most. So touch screens, maps, things like that, they're useful, but they don't create the wow factor. This thing, like color on an ancient object, causes people to pause and look and question and engage. And when we talk about engagement, that's the key here, right? But it doesn't always have to be projections. I've seen the same thing happen with sound. Maybe even a piece of music, something ambient, that people walk into a space and it's different. Something's different. And it causes them to pause and look around and pay attention to what's happening. I'm always amazed. I go to museums and they have objects that are instruments, musical instruments or drums, and there's no sound, right? So if you have any of those objects that made sound, it's important to share that sound. That's a real kind of deep and not very expensive kind of implementation for that kind of engagement. You know, we want people to use their devices, to bring their devices. We use QR codes to share things. All of that matters, and I think that that's not hard to do, and you do it assuming you have good Wi-Fi or cell phone connection. But when we install in the galleries a piece of equipment to engage an experience, it's very important that we're trying to actually make people pause for a minute and look around and question, why is this different?
Interesting. Thank you. Yeah, the last question, it is Ana Tirado that is saying, what is the most popular digital tech at the Met at this period? What do you think it is?
It depends a little bit, I think, on where the person is located. I'll give you an example. We are experimenting with the Met's website homepage and geographical delivery. So what we've learned from people coming to our website is that if they live near the museum, they're actually trying to plan a visit. They're trying to understand when the museum is open and how to get tickets. But if they live overseas, right now, when travel and tourism is still relatively low, they're typically not trying to plan a visit. So we're feeding different homepages depending on where someone is coming to that web experience. And we're seeing higher engagement because of that. So we see that when we intentionally think about someone's motivation, what are they seeking? So when they first arrive on the site, can we give them what they're looking for? That's audience first strategy. So web still matters a lot. I think, there's eagerness for augmented reality. The consumer grade equipment is not quite affordable yet, nor is it comfortable. I'm not going to go in a museum with a big heavy helmet on my head. But when that technology gets simpler and it looks more like this, right? And you could put them on and it's tethered to your phone. And this is very close. Many companies are working on this technology right now. So what I'm trying to do with my team is prepare content, right? We're not ready for display, but want to get the content ready. So when the hardware catches up, we're ready to go.
And it's also storytelling. So thank you very much, Douglas. We are running out of time, and I'm fair that the application closes up. So thank you very much. Now we go into the